drug distribution, and money laundering. Well, this made me particularly nervous because Mr. Houston had already established me a bank account in New York with the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. All of the money I had in this world was in that bank. The BCCI. I'm sure many of you understand who they are. Well, my Chinese counterparts preferred that I do business with a Hong Kong bank, but they said BCCI would do for the moment, since it was my money that was in there. They wrote me a check for $1 million. By the time the transfers were made and everything else, I had about $971,000 in a non-performer letter of credit deposited with BCCI. That was a lot of money. That was a real serious bonus, one that I had not expected, one that would later save my life. This intelligence officer, he proceeded to tell me that all I had to do was relieve Mr. Houston of his duties and get rid of him. I proceeded to tell him that took money, and he said, well, you got money. I said, I don't have any money. Not like that. I got to buy him out. He said, we'll do that separate. So he sent over a Hong Kong counterpart, Mr. William Yoon, one of the finest Christian men I've ever known. And he was an arms dealer. Mr. Yoon was involved in transporting Chinese Scud missiles on Mr. Yoon's own ships, the Yinghai Trading Company, to a place we all know as Libya. This was all going on. I didn't know it. Once again, I guess you folks think I drink or something. I don't. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I'm just a workaholic who once commits to something never, ever quits. That's been the key to my success. I told you I'm the luckiest guy on earth. I've succeeded in everything I've done, including stay alive to this point. We were able, I say we, my Hong Kong partner and I were able to buy Alex Houston out. I called a friend of mine who was a retired general, and I explained to him that Mr. Houston I told him the whole story, but in addition, I told him that he had a slave that he was running, a young woman, around 30 years of age, and a small child. I said, I need to go back to China, but I want to bring these people out of this thing and get them some help. He told me to forget it. You can't get them any help. There's no help available. Nobody knows what this stuff is. I said, well, I know what it is. I said, the formula for helping these people is relatively simple. He said, well, you help them, but you better get them out of this country. You don't steal from the CIA and live through it. So in a period of a week, I sold my home, well, in essence, a week, sold my home, divorced my wife, no loss there, and dissolved my company, cashed in my bank accounts, all except for two, the two biggest ones, the one in New York and another one I had in Nashville, Tennessee. I left the proceeds in there because I wanted to convince the CIA I had lost my mind. Because you see, when I rescued Kathy O'Brien and her daughter, I saw something well beyond my worst nightmare. I saw what I equated was mind control out of control. I rescued a 30-year-old woman who didn't know who she was, who had a perpetual smile on her face, her eyes totally dilated, and a child that was so hyperactive, I thought she was going to crawl up the ceilings. I rescued two of the worst cases I had ever seen in all the mental hospitals and all of the experiences that I had endured right in Nashville, Tennessee, from a country western MC and stage hypnotist. I thought that at this late age, this was a real good idea to give something back, so I made my mind up that I was going to rescue these two people and find them some help, or help them myself. I couldn't find any help, so I moved them to Alaska, because I thought, well, I'm going to at least make it inconvenient for them to kill me. There's only one road into Alaska. Everybody that comes into the place is photographed. And it's extraordinarily difficult to do a hit there. So I thought, well, this will work. I had a friend of mine on the inside that was guiding me with information that was extraordinary. You see, the reason I'm here today and the reason I was successful in marketing is advanced planning. No, I didn't plan this meeting tonight in advance, much beyond about 3 months. But I did plan exactly how I was going to execute this, because you see, we worked in behavioral modification and mind control. I know what they know about planning and structuring psychological warfare, particularly as it pertained to someone in my precarious position. Kathy and I and her daughter Kelly went to Alaska. Her daughter was shortly institutionalized thereafter with homicidal and suicidal ideations, respiratory failure. Our book, Transformation of America, will give you a better idea of all the details. But I wanted to take you through and walk you through this so that you would understand what you're going to hear is probably the most terrifying, horrifying existence I've ever heard of. Now, I came from places that this was their normal daily fare. In horror, that is. I knew that our country was involved in the drug business. I didn't know they'd taken over the world's drug business. I didn't know that our Justice Department had long since collapsed. I didn't know that the Mafia and the CIA were now one. I did not know a lot of things that I know now today. Kathy O'Brien rescued me. She gave me the opportunity to get in touch with my spirituality. And if you don't think you'll find your spirituality in a situation like I was in, then you're not going to find it. I was very, very grateful to her for this, and I am today. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to let you folks know about this tool of the New World Order. Adolf Hitler called it his #1 project for the New World Order. George Bush stood up on camera and repeated the words, "This time we're going to have a kinder, gentler world, a new world order." He was referring to mind control. The story you're going to hear tonight involves what leaked out in Congress in 1977 under the guise of MK Ultra. There are over 100 projects involving MK Ultra that are operational. They're not projects anymore, they're operations. What we want to do now is get the solution put in place, and that is to abolish the only thing that is standing between Mark Phillips, Kathy O'Brien, and Kelly, and hundreds of other survivors that we've had to deal with over the past 7 years, to address this in Congress without being stopped, as we have been, for reasons of national security because of the 1947 National Securities Act. That act is what they're hiding behind. It's all that's left, but it's quite adequate. There are a number of presidential candidates that are talking about abolishing it. And I can assure you, one of them is not Arlen Specter. I'm going to introduce to you now Kathy O'Brien. I thank each one of you all for being here, and I would like to tell you this. We want to answer all questions that we can answer, and we'll do this in the workshop tomorrow. And I've got about 30 years of research in this. Kathy's got 30 years of living in it. Between the two of us, I believe we can provide you with either answers or documentation on any part of MK Ultra or mind control. Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. I am the luckiest girl in the world. I'm extremely fortunate to have survived my ordeal and to have survived those last 8 years of recovery, to get to this point to tell you all the secrets that they didn't want you to know. And I'm also the luckiest because I've fallen in love in the process. I want to thank all of you for coming out here tonight to arm yourselves with knowledge pertaining to mind control, which is covertly being used to usher in what Adolf Hitler first termed New World Order. Knowledge is our only defense against mind control, and you have a right to know and a need to know this information. Many government secrets and personal reputations were staked on the belief that I could not be deprogrammed to remember that which I was supposed to forget. They were wrong. They never took into consideration the strength of the human spirit. Now that I'm in control of my own mind and ultimately my own free will, I'm telling all that I photographically recorded and experienced during my existence as a CIA MK Ultra mind-controlled slave. I was a White House Pentagon level mind-controlled slave during the Reagan-Bush administration, and I recorded a lot of behind-the-scenes events that were going on to usher in this new world order. I was born in Muskegon, Michigan in 1957 to a multi-generational incest-based family. My father was sexually abusing me as far back as I can remember, and I've often heard him brag that he began substituting his penis for my mother's nipple while I was still an infant. This confused my primitive instincts, and although I couldn't know that what he was doing was wrong, nevertheless, I endured the suffocation and the pain and the discomfort of his abuse. Because of this, I developed what's known as multiple personality disorder. The term multiple personality disorder has recently been changed by the International Society for the Study of Dissociation to dissociative identity disorder. This is a much more appropriate title because, in essence, my MPD, or dissociative identity disorder, is defined as the mind's sane defense to trauma that's too horrible to comprehend. Rather than develop multiple personalities, in essence, I had less than one. It was totally shattered. I compartmentalized in my brain, sectioned it off, the memory of his abuse, so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. This compartmentalization of memory has amnesic barriers around it so that I couldn't remember what was happening. Yet within inside this memory compartment was a photographic memory. This compartmentalization of memory was something that the government was interested in studying. When my father would come in and abuse me again, the neuron pathways in my brain would actually open up so that that part of my mind that had dealt with his abuse before could deal with it again and again and again as needed. I developed another memory compartment, or personality as it used to be referred to, to deal with my mother's abuse. My mother was also multi-generational, incest-based, multiple personality disordered. She was not in control of her own actions, and her actions varied radically, but nevertheless I endured horrific psychological abuse by her that totally destroyed any remnants of self-esteem that I ever might have had. So I developed a compartment in my brain to deal with my mother's abuse. I had another compartment that dealt with the pornography that my father was subjecting me to. He had a 6th grade education, was a worm digger, and was supplementing the family's income with child pornography. When I was about 5 years old, my father was caught sending this pornography through the U.S. mails. Or so I've been told by law enforcement officials who've investigated and confirmed that that's exactly what happened. And according to my memories, that's exactly the events that occurred. This was a bestiality film involving my uncle's dog, Buster. Nevertheless, when my father was caught, my uncle Bob Tanis, who was also involved in filming the pornography with him, was my mother's brother, and he is part of the Air Force part of Air Force intelligence, and claimed to have been a part of the intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican, the Jesuits. And he told my father about a joint effort between the Catholics and the CIA in a mind control project whereby if my father sold me into the government's MK Ultra mind control project, he would receive immunity from prosecution. He thought this was a great idea, to have his sexual abuse be sanctioned by the government for paramilitary operations, special forces, mercenary operations, because with this visual acuity, they wouldn't miss their targets. They also were interested in it because when a person develops multiple personality disorder, in essence, they function through their subconscious mind, which has no ability to reason, comprehend, have any logical abilities to critically analyze anything. Therefore, suggestibility is extremely high, which was prime for mind control programming. After my father had agreed to sell me into the project and Ford had come out to the house and explained to him how to do it, my father was flown to Boston, Massachusetts, where he endured a 2-week course in what he termed reverse psychology. Now, this reverse psychology was an effort to confuse, in my mind, fantasy with reality. It also created certain reversals such as pain and pleasure, so that I can endure vast amounts of pain and never really know the difference. By the time I was 10 years old, I was making my first communion. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and our local Catholic church, Muskegon St. Francis de Sales Church, was heavily involved in the mind control operations that were going on with the CIA. It was there that I endured what they termed the right to remain silent. That was R-I-T-E, as in ritual. This was another reversal. It was a reversal of the Catholic Mass. And Father Don, who was head of the church at the time, was heavily involved in this aspect of mind control and subjected me to an occult ritual, the exact reversal of the Catholic Mass. Through this occult ritual, I was so severely traumatized by the blood traumas that were involved in the horrific sexual abuse that I endured, that my mind was highly suggestible and totally ready for program. It was at this point that Father Don, along with another one of my abusers who was present at the time, U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjagt, who later went on to head the Republican National Committee that put George Bush into the office of president, programmed me to accept orders and robotically carry them out without any question and without any ability to remember them, because in essence they took control over the opening of those neuron pathways to open up certain memory compartments at specific times. In other words, I couldn't switch personalities all on my own anymore. I lost that ability. Whatever trauma I was enduring, they decided how I would endure it. I never heard voices in my head anymore. I didn't hear the voices of myself arguing back and forth from different perspectives from the different memory compartments. Instead, I could only hear the voices of my abusers instructing me exactly what it was that I was supposed to do. One thing that I did on a routine basis after that is my father took me to Mackinac Island, Michigan. Mackinac Island, Michigan is located between the U.S. and Canadian borders, and it's where the Michigan governor's mansion is. At that time, the governor of Michigan was Governor George Romney. Governor Romney also sexually abused me. Governor Romney was heavily involved in implementing mind control into the state of Michigan through the education system and groundwork for what would be known as Global Education 2000 or America 2000, Outcome-Based Education, Goals 2000. It has so many names just to an attempt to hide from us exactly what's going on. But nevertheless, he was working on the mind control aspects in Michigan back when I was a little child. So he was well aware of my victimization in MK Ultra project. Additionally, I was sexually abused routinely at Mackinac Island by the Prime Minister of Canada at that time, Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau was heavily involved in the Catholic Jesuit aspect of mind control, and it was in Mackinac Island that I gained the greatest insight into the mergence of information between the CIA and the Catholics. The CIA had gleaned their information from the Hitler-Himmler research on genetic mind control, whereas the Catholics had been gaining information for years on the effects of trauma on the human mind. They'd been learning it through the Spanish Inquisition and other things for thousands of years. This information, when combined amongst these people, it's important to note that although there's high political names mentioned, it's only the same few who are mentioned over and over and over again. These few that I've mentioned are part of an effort to implement the New World Order under the guise of world peace through mind control of the masses. And it was my experience to witness the emergence of the Catholics and the CIA and what they called themselves as the Order of the Rose. We don't need another boys group to focus on. And this Order of the Rose, in essence, was nothing more than a signifier amongst those in the know that they were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control. At that time, I was being totally controlled by my religious beliefs, by my patriotism, by my love for humanity as a whole, and later on, by my maternal instincts. At the age of 13, I was dedicated to U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd, who would become my owner in the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control project. U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd is head of our Appropriations Committee, and he's been in office as long as I've been alive, and he's still in office today. Senator Byrd, after he became my mind control owner, began directing my actions on how I should be programmed. He ordered that I be sent to Muskegon Catholic Central High School, where an enormous effort was being put underway to implement a softer form of mind control in the school systems, which was the basis for the Global Education 2000. This plan is an effort to increase our children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. And I was sent to Muskegon Catholic Central for this purpose, as well as to endure more satanic rituals in the school's chapel. By the time I was a junior in this high school, one of my primary abusers went into the office of President of the United States. They'd often conditioned me that I had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. I certainly could believe that then. I mean, if I could have thought to tell, who would I tell? My mother, my father? The local police that my father had prostituted me to? Local politicians? U.S. politicians? Now I couldn't even turn to the President of the United States. I truly believed, I truly sensed that the whole world was involved in mind control. I thought the whole world condoned child abuse. I thought that's the way life was. I later learned, after Mark Phillips rescued me, that there is a place to run and there is no need to hide. They're the ones who've committed these crimes against humanity, and they have plenty to hide. And they're hiding it under a blanket of national security. And I do have a place to run. It's right at them for what they've done, not only to me and my daughter, but to all of us. Senator Byrd ordered that I be taken to MacDill Air Force Base, right here in Tampa, for mind control programming. There was an enormous mind control effort going on at MacDill, and I was taken back there periodically throughout the years of my victimization. I was also taken to the NASA installation at the Kennedy Space Center at that time. Byrd then ordered that I be transferred to my first mind control handler. A handler is someone who follows orders from an owner, so that I would be in key places at specific times as ordered by Senator Byrd. My first handler was a guy named Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox still resides in Chatham, Louisiana, immune from prosecution due to who and what he is aware of involved in this project. I was sent to Wayne Cox for further traumatization purpose to create a whole bunch of those compartments in my mind, because Senator Byrd wanted lots of compartments for programs, since I would soon be a White House Pentagon level slave. Wayne Cox is an occult serial killer, and he is free on our streets, and he resides in Chatham, Louisiana. Wayne Cox had been working under the direction of Louisiana Senator J. Bennett Johnston. He was running paramilitary mercenary operations under Johnston's directions. The way this was done is these other multi-generational children who'd been raised in the project and were under mind control were triggered into action through Wayne Cox's severe traumas and told exactly where they were supposed to go and what they were supposed to do according to J. Bennett Johnston's orders. The traumas I had endured with Cox are absolutely horrific. And J. Bennett Johnston took full advantage of my highly suggestible mind and told me that he had been involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He said that on that fateful day so many years ago, that when that ship disappeared, it came back a spaceship, and that he had transported through time to become a senator. Well, he sure seemed inhumane to me, so this wasn't too hard to believe that he was an alien. And when he showed me in 1977, when he showed me the top secret stealth fighter, it looked like a spaceship to me. I mean, here was this triangular ship that nobody knew about at that time. It had been kept top secret. And he was using mind control illusions and manipulation of my mind to believe that he was an alien so that I would feel totally helpless and carry out exactly what it was that he told me to do. Now, I'm not going to say that from my limited perspective under mind control, and even now that I've been studying so much else, that I know everything about aliens and that they're all people and they're all illusions like J. Bennett Johnston. I don't know. But I am saying that there was a deliberate, orchestrated effort to manipulate my mind to believe that my abusers were aliens, to confuse fantasy with reality, so that I would feel like I had to robotically do exactly what I was told to do. Anytime the government has secrets that they can keep from us, they can manipulate us by those secrets. In essence, they still remain 25 years at least ahead of us in technology, information, and knowledge, and secrets, and they are using them against us. I heard over the years many times over that the plan to usher in the New World Order would be to make all the people in this country and around the world feel totally helpless to prevent the New World Order from occurring, this world dominance plan, by saying that we had been invaded by aliens, so that we would say, oh, please, UN, come in and help us all. So bear in mind that there is a planned orchestration to get people to be submissive through the secret technology and information that they're keeping from you under the blanket of the so-called National Security Act that's threatening the security of our nation. J. Bennett Johnston felt like I was certainly ready for program after all the trauma I'd been through, and I was being led around by his illusions anyway, and sent me to Tinker Air Force Base for programming. Tinker Air Force Base is in Oklahoma, and I endured mind control programming there that was to confuse my mind with the Walt Disney theme of Peter Pan, and I became a Tinkerbell. At Tinker Air Force Base, I was programmed to carry out a criminal covert operation that involved J. Bennett Johnston's mercenaries. When the mercenaries were flown into South America, he did not want the plane to come back empty. It came back full of drugs. I then, as ordered, transported the cocaine across the state lines and into the state of Arkansas to a remote airport in Ouachita Forest. I've since identified that airport from pictures as being Mena Airport. It was 1978, and Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time. That was my first encounter with Bill Clinton. I delivered the enormous shipment of drugs as ordered, and also delivered a message, a little packet of information, and a personal stash of cocaine from J. Bennett Johnston to Bill Clinton, which I watched him snort. He did inhale. And he told me to tell his friend Ben that it was really good cocaine. All that complete, by 1980, I had become pregnant and given birth to my daughter, Kelly. Kelly had been, it was a genetic effort to have united occult serial killer Wayne Cox with my multi-generational genes in an effort to create what they hoped would be a perfect robotic spy to carry out whatever they wanted her to do with absolutely no conscience. Right after Kelly was born, Bird said, okay, that's enough trauma. And Kelly's born now. I want you to be transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, to my second mind control handler, Alex Houston. Alex Houston, like Mark told you, was a stage hypnotist in the country music industry. And the country music industry was to provide a cover for traveling to carry out the criminal CIA covert operations that I was to be involved in. Under the guise of the country music industry, I traveled as ordered, to various military bases and NASA installations where I endured high-tech mind control programming. This included sleep, food, and water deprivation, severe trauma, high voltage to compartmentalize the memory, and hypnotic or harmonic programming. My daughter Kelly had been born into the project and was subjected to these high-tech methodisms literally since birth. One of my primary mind control programmers was a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Michael Aquino founded the occult Temple of Set. And these bases and these occult so-called churches are on our military bases. Michael Aquino is also the one who is named as a child molester and satanic abuser in the Presidio daycare scandal. Michael Aquino did not believe in Satan. He did not believe in the low red devil idea. He didn't even believe in the evil concept. But what he did believe in was the power that he had in the form of a high voltage stun gun. And that was how he was programming my daughter and I both. Through the country music industry, I was also taken into Canada, Mexico, throughout the Caribbean, through the Norwegian Caribbean lines, Mexico, and in and out of Washington, D.C. In 1983, Senator Byrd acted in the capacity of a pimp and prostituted me to then-President Ronald Reagan. Now, Reagan was heavily involved in the idea of mind control, and I often heard him say that he believed the only way to world peace is through mind control of the masses. I don't believe that there can be any world peace without peace of mind, and I know from experience that there can be no peace of mind under mind control. So he certainly is wrong. Nevertheless, that was the idea that he adhered to. I was also taken to a place in Youngstown, Ohio, that was referred to as Charm School. And it was at Charm School where I endured the usual sleep, food, and water deprivation and trauma, and then sex slave programming. This sex slave programming was to program me for different sexual acts that were carried out with various politicians who thought that their perversions would never be revealed. They were wrong. It's all detailed in our book, Transformation of America. I was also programmed to carry out specific sexual perversions in Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove in Northern California is a political playground, and it's also a place where some business is discussed despite what they say. The business that's discussed is discussed in a little place called the Underground, and that Underground is spelled with a capital U and a capital N. Underground. It was there I heard George Bush talking about mass genocide. what the plans were for mind control. And it was at Bohemian Grove that my daughter and I were subjected to brutal perversions, all of which were being covertly filmed. These covert films were then used for blackmail purposes because these criminals didn't trust each other. And they all had some bad information on the other one that they kept so that they could keep each other under control. I was also taken to various CIA near-death paramilitary compounds. One was in the Lake Shasta area, but the one I was taken to most often was in Lampe, Missouri. Lampe, Missouri is this little bitty place right near the Arkansas border, not too far from Mena Airport. And it's a place where there's a whole lot of black helicopters and where guys are programmed to carry out military operations. Also a place where the Swiss Villa Amphitheater is located, where different country music acts who are involved in the white slavery and cocaine operations are brought through on a regular basis. In Nashville, the country music industry had been taken over by the CIA and was being used to transport the drugs throughout the country. Later, during the mid-'80s, a guy named Boxcar Willie came on the scene. Boxcar Willie sexually abused my daughter, and she's named him as one of her sexual abusers. But he also had been an overnight sensation through an ad that he did on television. An ad on television that used certain harmonics to make people think that he was something wonderful, and he became a success overnight because it was Boxcar Willie's job for the CIA to lure the country music industry closer to this major CIA cocaine hub near Lampe, Missouri. And the country music industry was subsequently moved to Branson, Missouri, particularly the cocaine operations and the white slavery aspects of it. It was also in Lampe, Missouri that I saw Bill Clinton and George Bush together. In 1984, they were there to carry out certain perversions, as well as indulge in what they refer to as the most dangerous game. It's their favorite sport of hunting humans. It's taken from a military operation where a person fights for their life and runs for their life in an attempt to escape being hunted. My daughter and I both endured being hunted by George Bush, and he's often said that it was his favorite sport. But hunting humans was the part that he left out. Nevertheless, he and Bill Clinton were there that one particular weekend after elections, and they were talking about the fact that George Bush was going to be the vice president again for another 4 years. And George Bush didn't particularly like this idea. He didn't like being in the public eye at all, but nevertheless, he was going to do whatever it took to usher in the New World Order. Looking back at George Bush's past, you'll find out that he was first with the United Nations. Then he became a head of our CIA. And then it was my experience to know that George Bush was heavily involved in the Order of the Rose, as was every other perpetrator that I've mentioned, including Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan. And it's important to note the orders from the Rose were orders from George Bush. George Bush, although he may not be at the very top of this world dominance effort, is a very significant player. And it was also my experience that Ronald Reagan followed orders from the Rose and that Bill Clinton followed orders from the Rose. On this particular day while they were talking, Bush said what I'd heard Senator Byrd say on different occasions.